Imagine you are a top executive in New York, grinding for 15 years just to build your capital and finally secure your financial freedom. Then one afternoon, you make a decision that defies every rule of capitalism by bringing on a new partner with absolutely zero vetting. You sign a contract giving them unrestricted access to your bank account and 50% equity in everything you have built so far. And here is the kicker. You give them a legal claim on half of every single dollar you generate for the rest of your life. You agree that if they decide to leave for any reason at all, they can legally strip you of half your cash and liquidate your assets. They can even force you to pay them a salary for years after they are gone, all without you ever running a background check. You didn't look at their credit score or resume, you just signed the deal blindly because you simply had a good feeling about them. If you did this on Wall Street, you would be fired immediately and laughed out of the room for being completely reckless with capital. Yet millions of people do this exact same thing every single year, but we don't call it a merger, we simply call it marriage. While we obsess over our stock portfolios, we ignore the one legal contract that has the statistical probability to destroy more wealth than a market crash. I'm Marcus, and today we are dissecting the invisible financial risks that threaten to completely wipe out the wealth of the middle class. If you want to protect your assets, make sure to subscribe, because today we are taking the romance completely out of the equation. We are going to prove why the person you wake up next to is statistically 10 times more important to your net worth than the S&P 500. Here is the fundamental financial disconnect that absolutely nobody ever mentions during the champagne toast at an engagement party. To the IRS and state courts, marriage is not a union of souls. It is simply a legal consolidation of assets. It is legally defined as a merger of two economic entities, triggering a cascade of complicated tax laws and liability clauses. When you say, "I do," you are legally binding yourself to another human being's financial impulse control for the rest of your life. Most Americans spend more time reading the terms of a Netflix subscription than they do understanding the contract of marriage. They walk into the deal blind, guided by chemicals like dopamine, while completely ignoring the balance sheet of their partner. This ignorance leads to the first type of financial destruction, which I call the slow bleed of your net worth. Society tells us opposites attract, and while that works for movies, in wealth building, opposites do not attract, they attack. If you are a saver who values compounding and you marry a spender who craves dopamine, you are entering a war. You are not just entering a relationship, you are entering a brutal war of attrition against your own financial future. Let's run the numbers because the math is terrifying. It isn't an explosion, but a parasitic drag on your performance. Let's assume you are disciplined and you have optimized your cash flow to save $20,000 every single year. Over 30 years in the S&P 500, that capital compounds to over $2 million, meaning you win the game. But then you marry someone who believes money is perishable, someone who doesn't gamble but just likes buying nice things. They lease luxury cars, upgrade vacations, and buy lunch daily, creating a steady stream of unnecessary burn rate. These small transactions seem harmless, but they aggregate to $15,000 a year in lost investment capital. Suddenly, your household free cash flow plummets from $20,000 all the way down to just $5,000. If you run the math, that drop costs you nearly $1.7 million in future net worth. You didn't lose that money in a crash. You lost it because your partner's habits acted as a drag on compounding. You were frantically trying to fill a bucket with water while they were quietly drilling holes in the bottom. The psychological toll is devastating because you are forced to become the no police and the CFO from hell. Every single conversation about the budget turns into a negotiation, then an argument, and finally an all-out fight. Eventually, you surrender to mediocrity and watch your dreams of early retirement evaporate one delivery box at a time. But trust me, the slow death is actually the merciful option because the alternative is the financially fatal sudden death. The slow death is painful, but the sudden death of divorce acts like a financial guillotine to your entire net worth. We need to look at the actuarial tables without flinching, because the divorce rate for first marriages currently hovers near 50%. For second and third marriages, the failure rate spikes even higher, meaning that statistically speaking, modern marriage is just a coin flip. Now put your investor hat on and imagine I pitched you a hedge fund prospectus with the following terrifying risk profile. I offer you a 50% chance of modest returns and a 50% chance you lose half your principal instantly. Any risk manager worth their salt would run screaming from the room, yet we take this bet with our entire lives. When a divorce actually happens, the very first thing to vanish is your economy of scale, which is simple corporate logic. When you are married, you have two revenue streams efficiently supporting one overhead structure, one mortgage, and one set of utility bills. But when you split, that synergy vanishes, and you have the same income supporting two distinct infrastructures, doubling your overhead overnight. That is just the cash flow problem. Now we need to look at the asset side with the divorce destruction calculation. Let's assume a couple has a net worth of 500 grand, and in a community property state, that gets split down the middle. Theoretically, you walk away with 250,000, but that is a total fantasy number because you forgot transaction costs. Lawyers are the only ones generating profit here, as a contested split can easily burn $70,000 in billable hours. Then you have to liquidate the real estate, costing you 6% in realtor fees plus closing costs and moving expenses. Then comes the forced liquidation of assets, where selling equities at the wrong time triggers taxes and locks in market losses. By the time the dust settles, friction costs and taxes can effectively destroy up to 70% of your purchasing power. You are back to square one, but the tragedy is that you are 10 years older with half the time to compound. And we haven't even touched on the long-tail liabilities that follow you for decades, specifically alimony and child support payments. If the division of assets is the immediate amputation, then alimony and child support are the phantom limb pain that haunts you for decades. In corporate finance, we obsess over fixed costs, the mandatory expenses you must pay simply to keep the lights on. But in a post-divorce landscape, these payments become a terrifying fixed cost that follows you like a dark shadow. If you are the higher earner, you may be legally obligated to pay your ex-spouse thousands of dollars every single month. The law demands this payment for one specific reason, to maintain what they call the marital standard of living. Think about that phrase. The law states that even though the partnership has failed and the entity is fully dissolved, you are still responsible for funding the lifestyle of a partner who no longer contributes a single dime to your revenue. You are effectively paying a massive severance package to a fired employee that lasts for years, or sometimes indefinitely. It turns your ex-spouse into a long-term, unsecured liability on your personal balance sheet, like a bad debt you cannot escape. You can declare bankruptcy on credit cards or mortgages, but you cannot bankruptcy your way out of family support obligations. The government will ruthlessly garnish your wages before that money even has a chance to hit your bank account. I have seen high-earning executives making $250,000 a year living in tiny studio apartments and sleeping on air mattresses. On paper, they are the 1%, but after alimony and support, their actual disposable income puts them below the poverty line. They are generating wealth but keeping none of it, becoming indentured servants to a past relationship they cannot escape. They work 60 hours a week to subsidize a luxury household that they are no longer even allowed to enter. I know the comments will say I am too cynical and that marriage is about love, not profit and loss statements. I agree it should be about love, but the irony is that money is the single number one cause of divorce. Financial stress is the acid that eats away at affection. You cannot build a stable life on a cracked foundation. By treating marriage like a business decision early on, you actually protect the romance by removing the biggest stressor. When you align on the numbers, you stop fighting about the past and you start strategizing for a wealthy future. But if you ignore this, you open the door to something worse than divorce. You open the door to financial infidelity. This brings us to financial infidelity, which in the corporate world is called fraud. But in marriage, it happens every day behind closed doors. A recent survey found that nearly 40% of Americans have committed financial infidelity by hiding credit cards, taking secret loans, or stashing cash. Here is the legal nightmare. In many jurisdictions, you are jointly and severally liable for any debt your spouse incurs for family necessities. If they run up secret credit cards for gambling or shopping addictions, creditors do not care about your marriage. They only care about seizing your assets. You could wake up to find a lien on your house or a frozen bank account because of off-balance sheet liabilities you knew absolutely nothing about. You are tethered to their credit score, meaning if they tank their rating, you become radioactive to lenders and can never get a mortgage. You are a prime borrower swimming with a subprime partner who is secretly tying heavy concrete blocks to your ankles while you try to stay afloat. You need to know exactly who you are swimming with before you jump in the deep end. So how do we de-risk this massive acquisition? How do we prevent this merger from failing before the ink is even dry? The first step is a process I call extreme financial vetting. You would never hire a CFO for a startup without scrubbing their resume and checking references, yet people marry strangers based entirely on vibes. I know it sounds unromantic, but you need to have the money date. And I don't mean chatting over wine, I mean a full financial audit. Before engagement, you need full transparency. Show me your credit score, show me your student loans, and show me your credit card utilization rates. You are looking for behavioral patterns, asking if they view debt as a strategic tool for leverage or simply as a subsidy for their lifestyle. Do they spend money to regulate their mood, or do they avoid opening the mail because they are terrified of seeing what is inside? These are not cute quirks. These are structural defects. In finance, we say past performance is not indicative of future results, but psychology disagrees. In human psychology, past performance is the best predictor of future behavior, and you cannot fix a person who does not want to be solvent. If your financial values are opposed, if you are a compounder and they are a consumer, you cannot marry them. The deal is dead. You will spend your entire life frantically bailing out their sinking boat while you drown, but if they actually pass this vetting process, you move to the final and most controversial step of the negotiation, the step that separates the amateurs from the true professionals. The second step of our defense strategy is the most controversial topic in relationships. It is the dreaded P word, the prenuptial agreement. There is a massive stigma that prenups are only for billionaires or narcissists planning to fail, but that is absolute nonsense. Here is the critical insight that almost everyone misses. Even if you sign nothing, you effectively already have a prenuptial agreement. If you marry without a private contract, you have implicitly agreed to the default prenuptial agreement written by your state legislature. You are accepting default terms drafted by politicians who do not know you and frankly do not care about your future. Those default state laws are often archaic, arbitrary, and scientifically designed to maximize courtroom conflict and generate massive legal fees. A private prenup is simply saying we respect each other enough to write our own rules rather than letting the government dictate them. Think of it as a disaster recovery plan. You don't buy car insurance because you plan to crash your vehicle today. You buy it because driving is inherently dangerous, and as we have proven, marriage is also statistically dangerous to your wealth. A prenup forces you to have the hard, uncomfortable financial conversations while you still love and respect each other. It allows you to clearly define exactly what is mine, what is yours, and what is ours before the conflict starts. It protects the premarital assets and the empire you built alone from being seized during a chaotic separation. It effectively inoculates you against your spouse's pre-existing debt, ensuring their past mistakes do not destroy your future. It can even pre-negotiate alimony terms so that you are never at the mercy of a judge having a bad day. I call a prenup a love letter to your future self because it says I care about fairness more than tradition. Here is the litmus test. If your partner refuses to sign or even discuss a prenup, that is a massive red flag. It means they are either emotionally immature and completely unable to handle basic adult financial conversations without getting defensive. Or worse, they are strategically banking on the state's unfair divorce laws to extract value from you at a later date. In either scenario, you absolutely cannot proceed with the merger. You must walk away from the deal immediately. However, I want to flip the script because if you survive the vetting and sign the contract, marriage transforms completely. It stops being a liability risk and suddenly becomes the greatest wealth acceleration vehicle in human existence. This is the superpower merger. Two high-income earners with shared values living on one income and aggressively investing the other. It is the fastest way to become wealthy in America, specifically during the dual-income no kids or DINK phase. You achieve massive economies of scale by splitting the rent, sharing one vehicle, and doubling your tax-advantaged investment space. You now have access to two 401ks and two IRAs, allowing you to shelter massive amounts of capital from taxes. Beyond the math, you gain a built-in accountability partner who stops you from making stupid emotional financial decisions. When one person wants to impulse buy a boat, the other talks them down. When one loses a job, the ship floats. A financially aligned marriage is an unstoppable fortress, but we must also address the non-working spouse in this business model. If one partner stays home, they are sacrificing their career trajectory and earning potential to manage the domestic infrastructure. This is a massive contribution to the enterprise, saving on childcare and management, but it is a massive risk for them. If the marriage ends, they have a 20-year gap in their resume and zero retirement assets in their own name. This is why the working spouse must treat the household as a business where both employees are compensated fairly. You should be funding a spousal IRA every year to ensure the stay-at-home partner is building their own equity. Ultimately, the decision of who to marry is the single most important asset allocation decision of your entire life. You are allocating your time, your emotion, and your future earnings to a single stock, so do not pick a penny stock. Do not pick a volatile meme stock. You want to pick a boring, stable blue-chip stock with consistent dividends. You want a partner who compounds you, not one who discounts you, so here is the actionable play for tonight. If you are single, add financial literacy to your list of deal breakers right next to kindness and physical attraction. If you are dating, stop avoiding the money talk and ask them what wealth means to them before you propose. If they say buying a Lamborghini, run away. If they say freedom and security, then you keep listening intently. If you are already married to a spender, intervene immediately, separate the finances, and build guardrails to protect the household. Marriage is a high-stakes game where the upside is infinite wealth, but the downside is total and absolute ruin. Treat it with the respect it deserves, do the due diligence, read the contract, and choose your co-founder wisely. Because a broken heart eventually heals, but a broken retirement account lasts forever, so go have that conversation tonight. If this video helped you realize you need to have a serious talk, please share it with your partner tonight. Frame the conversation as building our future empire together, rather than just fixing their past financial mistakes. I'm Marcus, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe so I can see you in the next breakdown.